Good morning. Welcome to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research's webinar on how to write a successful proposal for FSR's Fellowship Program. I'm Mary McGowan, CEO of the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. FSR is the leading international nonprofit association committed to accelerating research in sarcoidosis, providing education and support to those living with sarcoidosis and their care partners, and raising awareness about sarcoidosis worldwide. We are thrilled to be joined today by those of you who share our passion in searching for better treatments and cures for sarcoidosis. Just a quick bit of housekeeping, your phone will be muted. However, we would like to encourage you to ask questions. There is a chat box located at the bottom of your screen. Type your questions in this box throughout the presentation. We will have a question and answer period at the end of the Zoom. This webinar will be recorded and will live on our website. FSR was founded over 20 years ago by a woman living with sarcoidosis and her husband. Since that time, FSR has provided over $5 million in support of sarcoidosis research. FSR is dedicated to providing education, support, and advocacy for patients living with sarcoidosis and their physicians who care for them. FSR has over 60,000 members in our community. FSR has a four-pronged approach. First, we work to advance and accelerate research in sarcoidosis. FSR has a robust fellowship and grant program to support researchers in the sarcoidosis space. In addition, through FSR's SARConnect program, FSR works with academic and industry partners to identify willing clinical trial participants and to ensure that all research remains patient-centered. FSR also provides those living with sarcoidosis numerous support opportunities, including wellness programming, social events with others who have similar lived experiences, and one-on-one support through our Patient Navigator program. Additionally, FSR is committed to providing educational opportunities for patients and clinicians in order to provide them with the most up-to-date research and clinical information in sarcoidosis. Finally, FSR advocates for researchers and clinicians and those living with sarcoidosis by encouraging more funding for sarcoidosis research and working to reduce access challenges. FSR is proud to work with our esteemed scientific advisory board composed of world-renowned key opinion leaders within the fields of sarcoidosis, medical research, therapy development, and medical practice. As some of you may know, FSR has launched a campaign focusing on the high prevalence and severity of sarcoidosis among African American women. The statistics demonstrating this disproportionate impact are staggering. African American women are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with sarcoidosis and are 18 times more likely to be hospitalized as a result of their sarcoidosis than white men, and 13 times more likely to die than white men or women. To address these concerns, FSR launched the Ignore No More campaign to raise awareness and education of sarcoidosis among African American women and physicians to increase understanding of risks and barriers to care and clinical trials for African American women, and increase earlier diagnoses and better disease management for all African American women with sarcoidosis. The first arm of this campaign launched in October of 2020. And reached over 60,000 people through presentations, webinars, and the distribution of our podcasts. FSR is proud to partner with Gerald Prescott Galen, an actor from AMC's The Walking Dead and BET's All the Queen's Men, to help us raise awareness. Ms. Prescott Galen is living with ocular and pulmonary sarcoidosis and was recently diagnosed with cardiac sarcoidosis. Please view the video in the chat for her powerful story and why this campaign means so much to her. FSR is also proud to partner with 11 organization partners, 2 sponsors, 2 media partners, and 7 hospital partners to raise awareness through this campaign. You can help too by liking and sharing our posts on social media, watching our recent webinar, the link is also in the chat, helping us make connections, and joining as a partner in future campaigns. I would now like to introduce Tricia Shivas, FSR's Chief Strategy Officer, to provide you with an overview of FSR's Fellowship Grant Program. Thank you, Tricia.
Thank you so much, Mary. I'm now going to just speak a little bit about the program itself, and you do see in the chat a link for the fellowship, so you can get more details on how this works. We started this fellowship program just a few years ago, back in 2018, and we're really proud to share that we have over $1.4 million in fellowship funding that has been given out to over 6 different fellows. The 2021-2023 fellowship grant was our recent grant, and we're now in the 2022-2024 grant. The latest opportunity is an additional 2-year fellowship for 2022 through 2024 for $150,000 over 2 years. So the maximum funding for this is $75,000 per year per fellow. The applicants of this grant will be accepted for the grant from both institutions and individuals. Funding for the fellowship will be provided directly to the research center. These research centers will be required to provide awardees with a stipend to support their fellowship. This grant is specifically focused on early career physicians who are looking to grow their experience and understanding of sarcoidosis. This fellowship offers opportunity not only for research in the lab and other kinds of research that you will do with the support of your institutions, but also the opportunity for making sure that you are providing clinical support and get to know the patients that you are serving through the work that you are doing. The fellowship itself is placed at these different centers all around the world, so you get a chance to apply and work with some of the leading centers. The funding is provided directly to that host institution biannually, and then they provide the stipend for the fellows. We have 2 different types of applications that we do accept. We do accept a mentor-supported application for a fellow. In this case, the fellow themselves apply. They have a pre-identified project that they're wishing to work on. They have a pre-identified fellow mentor, that they would also be working with. And the project can be new, or it can be an ongoing project that you've already started and are working on. The second type of the application is an application from the institution or from mentors who are seeing the fellow. So the mentor themselves or the institution, if they have a fellow who is already lined up, doing good work, specifically in sarcoidosis, and they would like to try to ensure funding for that fellow, we also accept grant proposals from them as well. The criteria that we have for this grant, each candidate must apply with a proposed study. So you must come with a study ahead of time, something that you're thinking will be able to significantly move the field of sarcoidosis. FSR prefers that the first year of training involve patient management, diagnosis, and therapeutic procedures. We think it's very important for everyone in research to have an understanding of the patient experience and being engaged with patients. In the second year of training, there'll be probably more focus on your research project, but we still hope that you'll stay connected with the patients throughout that process. Applicants must describe their career goals related to long-term commitment in sarcoidosis, and also think ahead to what you might do as far as finding additional funding for future work that you are doing. The commitment is to pursue work in the field of sarcoidosis. Applicants must provide a detailed budget and a budget justification. And for more details, we do have the link in our website. Just to go quickly over the budget, a couple of the allowable costs that we have are direct costs only. So fellows will be provided for salary and fringe benefits, but mentors are not covered through this. If you are seeking support for travel, that must be detailed out into the pricing for your budget and your budget justification. So is this for a presentation at a conference? Is this an opportunity to learn more and get more connected with the community? Those details should be clear. You can also have coverage of supplies and materials, and you can see a range of different things that are covered there. But again, you must provide a detailed explanation of this and the supply for the budget. The application criteria includes having information on the applicant, a biosketch very similar to the biosketch that we have with the NIH, your mentor or mentors, some people have more than one, with their bio sketch and information on them. A research training plan that includes guidance on how you will be getting into conferences or where you will be hoping to continue this work as you move forward. Training potential justification from the mentors as well as the mentee discussing things that they have done in the past. An explanation of the institutional environmental commitment. This is really important because we do want to make sure that all fellows are placed somewhere where they have good support for the work that they are doing in sarcoidosis, that there is strength behind that commitment, as well as a goal for great success. Again, we discussed the budget, so you also will need the budget, and then an overall proposal for what your impact would be on the sarcoidosis field. We do have some reporting requirements that you should be aware of. Biannual progress reports are necessary and are basically the trigger for payments, so you do want to make sure to get those in a timely manner. Financial reporting is also required as part of that biannual reporting to show spend downs and where you are in the cost for the budget. Additionally, we like the opportunity to work with our fellows, as you'll see today in the presentation by Dr. Liao, for presentations to come up and work with the FSR. And we do hope that all of our fellows will be able to provide an opportunity to explain to the patients and others who are helping to fund these grants why this is a valuable grant for them. So we would ask them to participate in a colloquium afterwards. Here are the following dates that you should be keeping at front of mind as you're applying for this grant. March 15th is the deadline for applications. We do have a robust review process with our scientific advisory boards and other ad hoc members that are brought on through their expertise to review this. That is March 20th through April 30th. The decision is made in May of 2022 once it goes through approval of the full scientific advisory board and then approval of our governing board of directors. May through June, we work with the host institution to finalize payment processes and contracting. And then in July, your project can start in earnest. It is now my pleasure to introduce our two speakers for today, Dr. Lisa Meyer and Dr. Shuyi Liao. Dr. Lisa Meyer is the Chief of Division of Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences at the National Jewish Health. She's a professor of medicine at National Jewish Health and is in the Division of Pulmonary and Critical Care Sciences in the Department of Medicine, the School of Medicine and the Environmental Occupational Health Department in Colorado School of Public Health at the University of Colorado as well. Dr. Meyer is a physician scientist whose major research interests focus on defining genetics, genomics, epigenetics, and exposure risks in occupational, environmental, and idiopathic lung diseases to help define biomarkers and therapeutic and preventive interventions. These investigations are centered on two granulomatous diseases, sarcoidosis, a granulomatous lung disease of unknown etiology, and CBD. Dr. Meyer sees patients in the clinic with these diseases. In addition to the above activities, Dr. Meyer enjoys teaching house staff and students, as you'll hear about today, educating patients, physicians, and healthcare providers, and working to provide consultation to communities, workers, and industry. Dr. Meyer is a member of FSR's Scientific Advisory Board as well. Dr. Liao is a pulmonologist and an assistant professor at the National Jewish Health in Denver, Colorado. He received his doctorate from the National Taiwan University, his master's in public health, and his Doctor of Science from Harvard Medical School. Dr. Liao completed his internal medicine residency at the University of California, Riverside, and his pulmonary and critical care medicine fellowship at the University of California, Davis. Dr. Liao joined Dr. Meyer's lab, focusing on research of sarcoidosis in 2019. Since then, he has been the recipient of the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research Fellowship for 2020 through 2022, so has some experiences to share with you. And Dr. Liao is a recent recipient of the 2022 Uplifting Athletes Young Investigator Draft Grant, jointly funded by the FSR. Thank you, Dr. Meyer and Dr. Liao.
Okay, thank you for the nice introduction. So I will start with the mentee's perspective. Then I will hand over to Dr. Lisa Meyer, talk about the mentor's perspective. Next one. So how to write an effective proposal? I would say this is my first grant proposal. And then so I would say the first thing, start early. Then you want to develop a strategy, plan the application, and also check the application requirement. Next. So when I say start early, you want to start at least 3 to 4 months prior to the application due date, or even you can begin planning even sooner, like 6 months or even a year ahead, like something like that. You want to know your organization's grant manager to assist with the application, because they need to like sign up, they need to talk about the time, they need to get some like grant officer or all that kind of thing. They take time. So you want to know who's your grant manager, and they can offer a lot of help. And you want to notify your mentor early and give them plenty of time to discuss about the grant proposal. Your mentor may be busy on the big R1 submission, UO1 submission, that kind of thing. Or they maybe take some vacation or something. So you want to talk to them about the timeline and then how to get this done early. Next one. So you want to develop strategy. I think the first and a very important thing is you want to assess your career situation and need. Why you want to apply for the foundation FSR grant? Why not other grant? Why not the KO or why what other grant? Maybe T32 is most suitable for you in the situation. So you want to kind of assess your career situation. Like FSR grant, like Trisha mentioned, this is sarcoidosis focus grant, and this is a 2-year grant. You need to focus on some like research, some like clinical aspect, that kind of thing. So you want to make sure this meet your career situation. And then you want to identify your mentor and collaborator. You want to discuss with them with your plans, the project. I need to be very early and sure they are on board, because there's a mentor grant. So you want to have a mentor for that. And then the third thing, you want to consider your area for growth. So what you want to learn during this funding period? Do you want to take in classes? You want to attend a conference, or you want to attend some specialty clinic? So you need to identify the resources you need. So are those available within your organization, or you must be obtained elsewhere? Like in my own grant proposal, I talk about I want to learn something about the cardiac sarcoidosis from other specialists. So I want to know if we have this in our organization. If not, should we go to some like nearby organization or have this kind of joint plan to kind of observing other people's clinics? So you need to identify those resources early. Next one. Then you want to plan your application. So you need to coordinate with your mentors, like I mentioned. So the structure for the FSR grant is like a care work. So you have a couple kind of things you need to work about the career development and all this kind of proposal. And then you want to put together an advisory committee to assist with the planning and provide the critical feedback. So my recommendations, ideally, you want to include someone they are not familiar with what you are doing. They are usually the one who can think outside the box because they don't know what you're doing. So sometimes when you mention something, you think very straightforward, but maybe not that easy for other people to understand. So if you bring some people, they are not totally familiar with what we're doing, they can give you this kind of critical comment. And then I'll say the next thing, you want to draft your specific aims and hypothesis first. And usually there's an open discussion, idea exchange with the committee or your mentors. I would say I probably, when we do this, I probably spend maybe 2/3 of time to just doing this kind of specific aim and hypothesis. So this means do not write the entire grant yet. You really need to know the specific aim and hypothesis first, and they may change a couple times. And then an important thing is this is not a copy and paste of your mentor's research, not a copy of paste of your mentor's R1, their aims, all that thing. This is mentor grant, so you want to make sure you have a distinct hypothesis, but it can be related, but actually I think should be related because you want to use your resources and your expertise for your mentor, but need to be distinct. Next one. And then I think the thing is you do not want to propose too much. I mean, as a junior faculty or as my first grade, I have a lot of ideas, have a lot of things to do. But you try to avoid too ambitious project. These need to be novel and significant, but also need to be feasible within a time frame. This should be like within 2 years. And then hypothesis should be testable. You know, initially I tried to propose a lot of things, but Dr. Lisa Meyer, my mentor, tell me, you should want to propose something you can do within the 2 year. Of course, when you have time, maybe when the patient enrollment is very successful or the research has been very successful, you can always do more than you propose. But when you propose, make sure this be feasible within these 2 years. And then, like I say, the scope of ends should match the available time and resources. So this is important. You need to identify what resources you have upfront. And then your research and career development should be matched. If you propose more like basic, more like translational research, your career development maybe, I would say, not going saying, oh, I want to learn this kind of how to develop new mice model, that kind of thing. And vice versa, if your research is more basic, then you probably want to propose your career development spend on time to learning some like lab technique, that kind of thing. So it should be matched. Next one. So here's just some tips for the writing. So you want to write clearly and concisely. You want to make sure your figure and legend are readable, and then the figure is worth 1,000 words. Figure is very important. You want to guide the reviewer with the graphic as much as possible. You want to let the reviewer kind of know what you're doing, and then you make sure you edit and proofread to avoid the grammar and then a grammar error and the typos. I think the key thing is you want to make the reviewer lives easier. If when you write this, you can think, if you are a reviewer and you see this, you want to make sure the figures easy, and then you can get it, understand what they are saying. Remember, all this reviewer, they use their volunteer time to do this, so you want to make their life easier. Next one. So the second part, important part for this mentor grant is the career development plan. So you need to outline the new skill you will get. So you need to assess what skill you already have and what you will get, and how do you get what kind of thing you can use to gain those skills. You can take the course, you can do the workshop, you can through the mentoring process, all that kind of thing. So you need to provide a career development timeline, including a plan to apply for the subsequent grant support like KO. Next one. So the research strategy, first one is the specific aim. This is, I would say, this is the most important for the whole grant. So you want to have a strong testable hypothesis. The hypothesis, you need to solve a specific problem rather than searching for a problem or just collecting the information. So you want to identify a problem and how to solve it. And then each M should be related, but also independent. So M2 can be related to M1, but they should be still doable if M1 doesn't succeed. And then after this, you should end with a major contribution to the biomedical field or clinical practice. What if you finish this M, what will this M lead you to? Maybe advance the biomedical field, or they can advance or other kind of career or work plan. And I think a summary figure helps, to outline the relationship with all these M's. A figure is worth 1,000 words. Next one. So the research strategy, I think that the two things, the important thing for the reviewer to consider is significance and innovation. So you need to outline why this problem is important and how the study result will improve the scientific knowledge or clinical practice. need to be innovation. So how your proposed research will improve the current research or this kind of clinical practice. It can be a novel concept, novel methodology or intervention, or it can be an improvement of the existing approach. Next one. So how do you write the approach? So the important thing is you need to outline how the method analysis to test the hypothesis. And then also, in the ideal world, you finish all the thing without any issue, but you want to know what's the potential problem and what's the alternative strategy. If the primary goal in your aim is not able to finish or succeed, what's the alternative strategy? I think the third thing is very important, power calculation. I cannot remember how many times I got a feedback from the reviewer say, oh, you don't have enough power. I don't think it's feasible, all that thing. Power calculation is very, very important on all the brain. And then if you don't have a capacity or you are not familiar with all this kind of statistic things, make sure you reach out to your biostatistician in your institution to see what's the best way to do this power calculation. Next one. So I will hand over to my mentor, Dr. Lisa Meyer, who has been spending a lot of time with this grant proposal. Dr. Lisa Meyer.
So thank you, Shui, and I also want to thank the FSR for not only supporting Shui, but also supporting this incredibly important area. And I'm going to try to outline some tips from a high level, not only as a mentor, but also information that I try to convey to my colleagues who also I provide mentorship to. And I think, the key thing that we have to all remember is really we're trying to set up not only our mentee, but also ourselves for success. To me, mentorship is a super important part of what I do. It also is actually a lot of fun. I get to, hear from people what they want to do with their lives and try to help them figure out the best path. This is not about me prescribing a certain path. It's really about working with someone in a team setting to help get them to become an independent researcher and an independent faculty member. I'm going to outline some kind of high-level points here. I'm going to talk a bit about sarcoidosis and why I think it's super important that we have folks involved in this research. And then I'm going to give a few additional tips. Again, I really appreciate Shui providing this groundwork, and you'll probably hear some points that I'm going to make that will echo some of his comments. And as a mentor, I think there's a number of issues that we have to address, and as we're providing mentorship to people, that has to be a priority. This is something that takes time. Personally, I think the payoff is well worth it, but you really do have to make it a priority. And as Shui mentions, sitting with folks and outlining timelines, your, again, guidance for how they might want to consider different pieces is important. I also want to reiterate that this is not, again, you are telling folks what to do, but it really is a process where I think you're trying to explore the person's interests and passions, figure out, as Shui already mentioned, like what skills do they have and what skills do they want to develop, and how might you be able to help them in that regard. Again, it's not taking a square peg and trying to put it into a round hole. If somebody wants to do translational research, that's where they should be focusing. If someone wants to do more clinically oriented research, that's where they should be focusing. And the other piece of that is with their skills and where they see their career going, do you as a mentor have the skills, or does your mentor have the skills and capacity to provide that mentorship? It's not only about time, although time is an important part. There is also issues about research infrastructure, as well as potentially support that you should be giving the person, whether it's financially or for your research team, so that they can put their best foot forward. I think The part that I really like about a mentee mentorship relationship is that it is part of the team science that I really espouse and enjoy being part of. And I also want to just hit on a point that Shui made, that team mentorship provides the opportunities for mentees to work with folks across the spectrum. As an example, Shui brought up that he's got somebody on his team who does a lot of omics research, but really is more involved with proteins and COPD. One of my other fellows has someone who's interested in microRNAs because that's her interest, but is working in asthma. And so again, I think you want to bring people with different skills. The other part that I think is so amazing about this grant opportunity and about team mentorship for sarcoidosis is if you don't understand the clinical aspects of the disease, I think it's hard to think about some of the research questions. And so again, Shui has had one of our top clinicians who's in clinic 4 or 5 days a week, Dr. Clara Restrepo, as part of his mentorship team. And I think, he would tell you that that's been very, very helpful to him. And I've honestly seen a marked, increase in his expertise from a clinical standpoint because of these kinds of opportunities, as well as in his ability to think about the questions that he's asking. And the other part of this that's great for me is when I get somebody to work with, like Shui or some of our other folks that I've been able to mentor, they always look at the questions that maybe I've been thinking about in a different way. And it helps me to rethink my research also. Next slide, please. So I just want to spend a few minutes talking about why sarcoidosis. And I really want to reiterate that I think that this is such an important research topic. Again, I think that both Mary and Tricia helped set that stage in the discussion of the Ignore No More campaign. Again, we know that this is a disease of disparities, and it's not just inner city folks, it's folks that are in a number of different disparate and groups across the country and need our help. And I think there's an opportunity for impact, but there's a lot we don't understand even about this disease at the current time. I hear a lot of folks saying, well, you can't support a research career in sarcoidosis. And I don't think that's true. And I really would like to emphasize that we need junior investigators and that they can be supported. While NHLBI has had underrepresentation for sarcoidosis in its rare disease portfolio, I do think there's a commitment to increase research funding and to increase the pipeline of junior investigators. So I'm just showing you some information that Dr. Louis Vuga, who is my program officer at the NHLBI. So the Division of Lung Disease, if you look at their portfolio, 18% of it is dedicated to rare disease. And the issues that are a problem from my standpoint is the impact of the diseases on people's lives is not 100% represented by this funding. You'll see cystic fibrosis here, 30% of that 18, IPF, 15%, and sarcoidosis falls in this group way at the bottom and is less than 2% of this entire 18% as of the 2017-18 budget. That has increased some. And I, again, do think that NIH is committed to increasing sarcoidosis research. They held a workshop that I was fortunate enough to chair back in about 2015. And I've provided the reference so that you can look at some of the areas that the workshop attendees came up as priorities for sarcoidosis research. While this was published now almost 5 years ago, many of those still need to be addressed, if not all of them. So I think there's also a roadmap out there for junior investigators to think about areas of research. Next slide, please. I think we're at an exciting time in regards to sarcoidosis research also. We are starting to see the limelight and receive attention And I think with that, again, I want to applaud the FSR's efforts to help us continue to build this pipeline because we need it. When I've talked to my chair of medicine, who's been involved in IPF, he really sees that we are where they were 5 or so years ago. You can see the number of publications, and PubMed has increased from less than 500 in 2000 to almost 1,300 in 2020, and hopefully that will continue. Now, IPF did increase from 733 at that same time frame to 4,000. So again, I think we have some opportunities here to keep moving this ball forward, but we are seeing interest from pharma and industry, professional societies. Again, we've had 2 guidelines passed in the past 2 years. There's a diversity of research topics, and we're finding more and more investigators are interested in being involved in this research area. There are a number of questions that I still, as I mentioned, I think need to be answered. And I think this is a lifetime of work for all of us. And I think, again, the causes, even understanding the natural history of manifestations, whether it's pulmonary or other organ involvement, as well as diagnostic and prognostic biomarkers, are important areas that we really need to continue to focus on. Next slide, please. So let's switch back to the topic at hand, which is this FSR grant submission. So whether you are applying as an institution and a mentor to attract a mentee, or as Dr. Liao and I did as a mentee mentor, I think that you need to think about what kinds of mentee experiences and career goals you can provide. And as a mentor, if you already have a mentee, you've got to ask and listen to those questions. It's really important, I think, to provide a tailored program for success for the mentee. I think, again, short-term projects and goals that can lead to publications should be a very early on consideration. We all know that all kinds of grant proposals are requiring a higher bar. And so if somebody comes in, a mentee comes in already having some of those publications and experience, they're going to be at an advantage. I think it's important to think about their long-term goals and projects and trying to use this as a way to set them up to continue to conduct research and to gain that clinical experience that I think is really important as a sarcoidosis investigator. I think the other thing is you got to make sure that, as Dr. Liao was talking about, that the mentee has an interest in this area, that they're passionate about sarcoidosis and or the project. And I will tell you that as an individual who's been involved with recruiting pulmonary fellows to our pulmonary program at the University of Colorado and National Jewish, as well as having mentored graduate students and postdoctoral trainees, including a number of pulmonary fellows, people have to have a fire in the belly. That's, I think, one of the big components of really helping them move forward is finding something that they do have that approach. Next slide, please. So how do you set up a successful proposal? Well, as I mentioned, I think that this particular FSR project is really unique because it allows people, whether they're an MD with a general pulmonary or even some sarcoidosis experience, to develop expertise clinically. And for example, Dr. Liao has gone into our neurology, our cardiology, our electrophysiology, and some of our other even pulmonary clinics to see how providers are approaching this disease. He's been involved in our case conferences that we have at National Jewish, as well as those that we have with our respiratory institutes with Mount Sinai and Jefferson, so across the country. And I think it's helped him also to establish some networking. I think, again, learning from each other with this iterative process that Shui nicely pointed out is something that takes time, and having the conversations early on about the project, then moving to the specific aims, and then into additional components of the research proposal are super important. And I don't know that we need to go over those again. I'm happy to answer any questions as they come up. Again, I think that it's really important to take any proposal that you write and consider, how can I leverage this for my next step? So maybe this is your first grant and you plan eventually on submitting a K or an R. Well, how can you now be set up with your expertise clinically, as well as the data to apply for that next study or proposal? There are items that the mentor also needs to address. You have to consider, and again, I always talk about recommending, as I've already mentioned, not dictating, a research committee and co-mentors. Who else can bring some of those skills to the table? And with Shui's situation, we had one of my colleagues who does statistical genetics and is an epidemiologist, and she's been actively involved, as well as I mentioned, one of our astute and top-notch clinicians, and someone else who's doing similar work in another disease as examples. I do think you've got to make sure that you can provide this team approach. Most of us are not sitting in a lab alone, and at this time, I can't really think of anybody who I know that does. And I think that team approach doesn't have to be just at your institution. Shui's had the opportunity to work with some of my colleagues across the country, and they've really, I think, embraced him as a team member in a number of the studies that we've done, and I'll show you a couple of those publications. I think it's also important to consider the research infrastructure. Not only do you have the patients, if not, again, are there colleagues out there who may complement your clinical setting or your research infrastructure? And again, that's where I think it's important as a mentor to think about what the mentee needs and what you can provide or what you need to look for outside or to collaborate. And then it is as a mentor, when my mentees are applying for grants like this, it's my job to make sure that there's institutional support. Again, as I mentioned, what's available in my group, what's available in my institution. And luckily, I'm in a situation where my institution isn't just National Jewish, it's also my colleagues at the University of Colorado, but who can and will commit to this. And so again, I'm often talking to my boss, our chair of medicine, or my colleague, Mark Moss, who's the head of our pulmonary division at the University of Colorado, to help with that institutional support. Next slide, please. So again, just some additional items to think about as a mentor. Again, can you support the project and preliminary data? I think it's hard to go into these grants without some preliminary data, even if it is the fellow using your cohort to develop some of that or data that you already have. Again, are there other opportunities that you can share with the fellow? I included a publication that I was fortunate enough to be able to let Shui be involved in. We had just finished up the ATS sarcoidosis guidelines, where I was the co-chair, and they were asking for junior people to help write this summary for clinicians in the annals of the ATS. And so you can see Shui was able to be a co-author on that. And I think that not only provided him with some of the clinical expertise, it also provided that networking opportunity. So he was working with other junior folks and other senior people. And again, can you hand off opportunities? Are you supposed to give a talk that now your trainee can give, or be involved in a research project that maybe you don't have as much time and they can help with? I think you need to think about, again, the publications or other pieces needed for submission of proposals. And I think it's super important to have regular meetings with trainees or mentees to help address timelines, help them outline them and expectations. Next slide, please. So here are just a couple of examples of projects where, again, we were fortunate enough to get Shui involved in those. And they really are part of his goal to be an omics investigator in sarcoidosis. So on the left-hand side of your screen, we had gotten Dr. Ivana Yang, one of my collaborators who's a PhD looking at epigenetic and genomic research in asthma, IPF, sarcoidosis, and chronic beryllium disease, got a small grant where we started to look at single cell sequencing in sarcoidosis and chronic beryllium disease. And it was really nice because we could look at progressive and non-progressive, and Shui could help us think through what do those mean. And then For another project that I'm working on with Manish Bhargava at the University of Minnesota, as well as Elliot Krauser at the Ohio State University, and Sonia Leach, a bioinformatician who I think Shui's also learned a lot about computational science. We looked at a number of other studies that had been done with gene expression and protein to say what pathways are involved in sarcoidosis and in progressive versus non-progressive. And again, he managed to get a first author publication on both of those. So again, thinking about those other ways to engage mentees is super important. Next slide, please. I think the next piece, in addition, is trying to make sure you're setting up your mentee for independence. So again, we all like to work together, and there are some folks that do a better job of getting somebody who's not just a mini-me, if you will, but able to really be their own person. And I think it's really important as a mentor to think about the next steps to launch the mentee, and that includes the publications. So what opportunities for service do they have? Can they be part of, for example, professional societies such as the ASOG junior faculty group, which has been actively involved. And I think Shui did that on his own even, and managed to get another publication with some of the junior folks across the country. If you've got a manuscript to review, again, getting them involved so they start to see how that process works, how you think about research, and then maybe the next time a paper comes your way, you can hand that off to them. But again, opportunities for service locally, regionally, or nationally is important. And then what are the next steps that they're going to need to think about for promotion? So Shui's now in his third year, and coming up in another year, he will need to go up, for example, at our university's mid-career review process. And so what are the things that he needs to have for that? Those are important points to consider. I think you've got to continue to have this iterative discussion and address these and other issues with the mentee. Sometimes other pieces come up. Somebody decides they may want to take a little bit of a different route in their career. Look, we've all been there. And I think those are the issues as a mentor that it's important to listen to and to work with a mentee. Again, not to say this isn't going to work, or, I think you have to do it a certain way. I think it's important also to provide and ask for feedback from the mentees. It's an opportunity for me for growth personally. And then I can do a better job to help them. I think you also have to think about opportunities to provide leadership growth. For example, Shui this year started helping with one of my senior faculty to run our division research forum and start to invite speakers and lead that process. And so again, my hope is he'll then help take that on now on his own in the next couple of years. And I think it's always important to remember that, while I really enjoy mentorship, it does help me, and it helps all of us who are involved in this academic process, because that's part of the requirements. And so even your mentee can help co-mentor somebody who might be a few years behind them. And that's important for their development. So that's important for the mentees to remember too. Next slide. So again, it takes a village to do this kind of work. And I would just like to briefly acknowledge a number of those pieces of that village, including first and foremost, the FSR, because again, I think this grant has been perfect for Shui's development, and they have really helped him to move his career forward, and I think helped bring out the parts that have let him shine. Of course, again, the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute is increasing funding, and we've got to continue to work with them. And I know the FSR has also done that. And then a couple of the professional societies that I just want to remind people about. ASOG is the America's Association of Sarcoidosis and Other Granulomatous Diseases. We've been on a bit of a hiatus with the pandemic, but we'll be planning a conference for next year, hopefully in person. And we were part of the conference that was hosted by the Cleveland Clinic. And then again, the FSR has this amazing opportunity to work with WASOG, our World Association of Sarcoidosis, with these clinics that are centers of excellence. So I think those are the comments that I have right now, and be happy to answer questions with Shui and others.
Thank you so much, Dr. Meyer, and thank you so much, Dr. Liao, for your wonderful presentations and great guidance with regard to the mentee-mentor relationship and practical guidance with regard to how to address a grant like this. We did receive a couple of questions. The first question we received was with regard to criteria. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice there for a second. With regard to criteria for early career and what that means from the FSR standpoint. So as Dr. Liao had mentioned, the FSR does follow in order to try to help those that are seeking potentially to move towards K grants in the future. We do follow the K grant model from the NIH. So this is someone who is still typically in the assistant professor level or something equivalent in their institution, and has a postgraduate, post their final degree, 10 years, less than 10 years of engagement typically in the field. This will then set people up for what they need to do in order to move forward in that space. We also received a question, and I think I will direct this to you, Dr. Liao, if you would like to put your camera back on. How much time do you typically dedicate balancing your research and your clinical work?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of depends on the, there's a couple of things to consider, right? Because I think for this foundation for sarcoidosis research, you do learn things from the clinical part. And then this is not a deal different because like first year, you kind of focus on some clinical and then second year partially research. So I think this probably is not a traditional thing about like research 75%, clinical 25%, because you also want to spend time to do the clinic. So this is it's hard to know how you did. I think this probably also depends on how much resources your institution have, all that kind of thing. So I think it's kind of case by case. So I usually would say I spend a little more time during my first year to do more kind of clinical work. The clinical work may not necessarily talk about like seeing patient. You might spend some time, this is kind of observe, like I spend a lot of time observe in the cardiology, how they do the EP study to do the cardiac sarcoidosis. I spent some time joining the neurologist clinic to see how they approach the patient with neurosarcoidosis. And then remaining spend time on research. I would say for my second year, I focus more my time on the research. So this is how you depends on how you're comfortable about the clinical thing. And then you can kind of allocate your time on different kind of aspect.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Meyer, we have a question, and I think you started to address this in your presentation as well, but advice that you have for helping to keep your mentee on track with regard to the grant and making sure that they are successful in all the different markers that they have to meet throughout the course of the grant.
Yeah, so just Tricia, to make sure you're talking about once the person has actually received the grant.
Once they receive a grant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, again, I think that I always like to have a timeline and have that either included in the grant or something that I've discussed with the mentee. So what are they doing? What do they expect to do within that first year? And sometimes we'll even break it down by quarters. And what do they expect to do for the, that second year? And then I think it's really important to keep, as I mentioned, Dr. Liao and I have a meeting at least every other week. And we discuss those kinds of issues. I will say, Tricia, that the FSR's requirement for reporting also helps because it makes sure that we as a mentor mentee are staying on top of those. But that's where I think this issue of addressing guidelines, where publications are, again, for Shui, when he first started, it was about, have you been able to get into the cardiology clinic? Have you, when we had Dr. Tavi, Ginny Tavi join us very soon after Shui got this grant, it was a wonderful opportunity for him to then quickly get on her dance card. And so again, those are the pieces. And then I think you have to have some aspects built in, for example, and Shui, we did this with Shui. When we bring new faculty on, we also do train them clinically. So we're providing, kind of this infrastructure where somebody's meeting with them on a more regular basis, talking about how do you do A, B, and C? When do you need to think about including somebody else, even, saying, hey, I'd like you to review a case at our case conference, which happens every other week within National Jewish and actually across, we invite people across the whole Denver community, and occasionally get someone like Dr. Divya Patel coming from Florida, or someone else who knows our group. But it's a way we will say, it'd be great for you to present a case, so then we as a group can also see how they're doing and if there are issues. I think it's also important to ask people, are there pieces that are providing a stumbling block, and how do we address those? But that regular check-in and having an overall timeline, I think, is super important.
So I'm going to have you both kind of build right off of that. That was actually another question that we received, was challenges both in writing the grant, getting the institutional support that you need in order to move the grant forward, and as recipients, as you're moving forward, challenges that you've seen that people can kind of anticipate and plan for.
Shui, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think one thing is, this is my first grant proposal. So there's a lot of stuff you need to kind of, my first one, right? So I would say there's like back and forth with my mentor, Dr. Desameyer. So I think the thing is, you definitely need to be kind of planned earlier. For me, it's a different, because I joined National Jewish in August 2019, and then the grant deadline is in January. So the time is a little limited, but I think if you has been in the institution for a while, you want to do this. I should say, luckily I got it funded, but I think if I can plan earlier, I think I can even write a even bigger proposal. It's my thinking. Back and forth, and then discuss. Yeah, and time.
I think it is helpful to be a mentor who has been writing grants for a while, my big thing is, and certainly I think Shui knows this as well as the other folks I work with, one and done is not it. You've got to be ready to have, whether they're, real or perceived setbacks. People don't usually, as Shui said, apply for one grant and get it. And, when I was lucky enough, it's been many years, when I applied for my K award, I had that opportunity, and I was funded first go round. That doesn't happen to most people. And I think that, remembering that is the norm, and that it's not about you or your project or your mentor, is another thing that's super important. I think another one to remember, and has been even more of an issue with the pandemic, is publications aren't easy to get through these days. The bar, again, there has been set higher, while, I think funding agencies are having more and more people apply. Again, great. We want to see for people like Shui, more of them coming down the pipe in sarcoidosis, so that we then see them moving to the next line. And the same thing that was happening with publications. And so trying to remember that it's not personal, and that this is the process, and taking a step back and trying to also listen to what the reviewers have said. Oftentimes they've got some really good points. And so trying to listen to that, and then getting back to the drawing board, or getting back on the horse, if you will, that you've fallen off, I think is super important. And I think those are ones that, that also takes some time. And there are moments when we all certainly feel a little bit, frustrated with submitting a grant for the fourth time. And yes, many of us do that. And that's part of what we have to do these days. I do think being creative about funding sources and publications is also super important. And that's where I think, again, Tricia and Mary and those of you at the FSR, this opportunity is a great one, because it does provide people with the chance to maybe apply for this grant as well as some other ones, and just trying to, stick to it, but also being creative within your institution. Another thing that Shui did was he went to our CTSA, that's an NIH funded clinical translational science award. It's called the Colorado Clinical Translational Science Institute. And he wrote a grant to get a preliminary study in metabolomics because it's an area he's interested in. He then leveraged that, as Tricia knows, for his uplifting athlete award also. And so I think just thinking creatively at any opportunity that comes down the road.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you both for participating in this really informative webinar. And I do want to just put a few reminders back out to everybody who's on this call. The reminder is that the applications are due on March 15th. You can learn more on our website. And if you have any questions about the grant itself, you can send it to Chase, who is our research coordinator, and he'll help guide you through that process. A recording of this video will be available. And for any information that you would like on our education or patient support programs, like our Ignore No More campaign, please drop an email to the info@Stop Sarcoidosis, or just visit the website and you can find the ways to kind of follow up there. Just another reminder to everyone, this is the first of our grant cycles. We do have other grants that are coming up. We're excited to share with you that we do have a $50,000 cardiac sarcoidosis focus grant that is coming up, and 2 pilot grant opportunities for $25,000 each. So keep your eye open for those. Both will open in April of 2022, and the deadline is for May 30th. And again, if you want more information, you can reach out to Chase at chase@stopsarcoidosis.org. And if you're interested in learning more about FSR research grants and grant opportunities outside of that, as Dr. Meyer mentioned, FSR puts out a newsletter once a month, and it does include opportunities for funding that we are learning about from other areas, NIH and beyond, as well as information on research and activities that might be of use to you. So please be sure to sign up for our physician community so you can get access to that as well. Thank you so much, and appreciate all of you joining us today. And thank you again so very much to Dr. Meyer and Dr. Liao for sharing your expertise as people approach what we hope will be a wonderful grant cycle. We're really looking forward to receiving all of your grants. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care.